When I first bought the house on Willow Creek Lane, I believed I had finally found a place that would let me breathe again. After years of renting tiny apartments and battling noisy neighbors, this small two-story house at the edge of the cul-de-sac felt like freedom. The streets were quiet, the lawns were neat, and everyone seemed to smile when I drove by. It was the kind of neighborhood where you thought you could build a life, not just live in one. The welcome letter arrived before the ink on my closing papers had even dried. It came sealed in a white envelope, embossed with gold lettering, Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Inside was a friendly but firm note outlining community expectations. No unapproved decorations, no visible trash cans, no parking on the street after 11 p.m. It felt controlling but harmless, a small price to pay for peace. At the bottom of the letter was a signature that would come to haunt me. Sincerely, Marjorie Lane, HOA President. Marjorie lived 3 houses down. Her yard looked like a magazine cover, trimmed hedges, color-coordinated flowers. Even the mail post was painted to match the shutters. She smiled every time we crossed paths, but there was something hollow behind it. Her eyes didn't smile with her mouth. They studied. The first few weeks passed quietly. I unpacked slowly, restored old furniture, and repainted walls that hadn't seen color in years. The house had character, small imperfections that made it feel real. I planted shrubs near the porch and installed a small flag on the mailbox, proud to finally have something of my own. Then the letters started coming. The first one was almost comical, a warning for excessive lawn growth. My grass was barely 2 inches tall. The second letter arrived a week later for unapproved mailbox modification. Apparently, my flag was considered an unauthorized decorative addition. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the HOA had mixed up addresses. I sent a polite email to Marjorie explaining that I was new and willing to comply with any reasonable request. She never replied. Instead, 2 days later, another envelope appeared on my doorstep, this one marked Final Notice. Inside, it stated that I was in violation of 3 separate community ordinances and subject to a potential fine of $300. I remember standing there, holding that paper, realizing this wasn't confusion, it was control. Someone was watching closely and they wanted me to know it. Over the next month, I started noticing things I hadn't before. Marjorie's car always seemed to drive past my house slowly, twice a day. When I took the trash out, she was there, watering plants, pretending not to look. At night, the porch lights of certain houses flicked on when I stepped outside. It wasn't paranoia. It was surveillance disguised as civility. One Saturday morning, I attended my first HOA meeting at the community clubhouse. I expected professionalism, maybe even warmth. Instead, I walked into a room where every head turned and every smile was measured. Marjorie sat at the center of a long table, papers neatly stacked in front of her like a judge awaiting trial. The meeting was about landscaping permits, parking violations, and petty rule changes, all delivered with bureaucratic precision. When my turn came to address the letters, Marjorie leaned forward slightly, her voice calm and polite. She explained that new residents often misunderstand the rules, and that compliance is mandatory to maintain community standards. Her tone carried a kind of finality that made discussion pointless. Afterward, as people filed out, I overheard fragments of conversation. Whispers about how Marjorie had kept the neighborhood perfect for 10 years. Perfect. The word echoed like a curse. I realized perfection, in this place, wasn't peace. It was control through fear. Weeks turned into months, and the fines escalated. A cracked tile on my porch became property neglect. A wind chime on the back patio was labeled noise pollution. My mailbox flag, the original sin, was cited again for failure to remove. Each notice carried an inflated fine and a threat of lien placement. It felt deliberate, personal, like someone wanted me gone. The day I received the certified letter, I knew the situation had crossed the line. It was an official notice of intent to foreclose. According to the document, the HOA had accumulated over $4,000 in unpaid fines, fines I had never agreed to or been properly billed for. Attached was Marjorie's signature once again. That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at the papers spread across the table. Every letter, every violation, every photograph of my supposed infractions. It was all orchestrated. This wasn't about neighborhood harmony. It was about power. Marjorie had built her own kingdom within Willow Creek, and I had unknowingly walked into her territory. I thought about moving, selling the house, cutting my losses, and starting over somewhere else. But something in me refused. I had worked too hard to finally own a home. And the idea of being bullied out of it, by someone drunk on authority, made my stomach twist. So I began to study. I read every HOA bylaw, every state housing regulation, every clause buried in fine print. I learned the limits of their power, and more importantly, how easily that power could be challenged if someone knew where to look. The more I read, the clearer it became. Marjorie had been operating outside her authority for years. Many of her fines violated state HOA transparency laws. Her notices lacked required documentation. Her actions weren't just unethical, they were illegal. For the first time, the fear began to fade. It was replaced by something sharper, colder, more deliberate. And now she'd chosen me as her next example. But the thing about examples is, they can backfire. I wasn't planning to fight her with anger. I'd fight her with transparency. The idea started small. What if I showed the truth publicly? Not gossip. Facts. Documentation. So, I bought a cheap microphone, downloaded editing software, and recorded my first narration. The HOA President Tried to take my home. It wasn't a rant. It was evidence, scanned letters, dated emails, footage of the fence that violated community standards. When I uploaded it, I expected maybe a few curious neighbors to watch. Instead, by morning, it had 30,000 views. And Margaret noticed. By sunrise, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications poured in like rain. Comments, shares, emails from people who'd lived their own HOA nightmares. My little neighborhood dispute had become a mirror for thousands who felt trapped by the same system. At first, I felt a strange guilt. I hadn't meant to expose anyone beyond my street. But as I scrolled, I realized how deep this ran. People from California, Texas, Florida, all describing presidents like Margaret, small rulers of smaller kingdoms. The video hit 100,000 views in 2 days. Then 500,000. And Margaret? She didn't hide. She called an emergency meeting of the HOA board. The notice was taped to every mailbox. Community reputation crisis. The irony was poetic. I didn't attend. Instead, I filmed from my porch as her SUV pulled up, headlights slicing through the dark. Board members shuffled into the community hall, whispering, avoiding cameras. The footage wasn't dramatic, but it didn't need to be. People love seeing truth revealed quietly. The next morning, I received an official cease and desist letter from the HOA attorney. It accused me of defamation and damaging community integrity. I smiled. They were scared. Every frame of my video was factual. Every image was time-stamped. I responded publicly. Another video, calm, factual, narrating the letter line by line. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't have to. Facts humiliate better than anger. Within a week, the internet took over. Journalists started emailing. A local news station requested an interview. The HOA tried to contain it, but the story had already escaped the gates of our tidy little neighborhood. Neighbors who once avoided me started waving again. Some even knocked on my door, quietly thanking me for saying what they couldn't. It wasn't courage that drove them, it was relief. Someone had punctured the illusion. But Margaret wasn't done. Power never surrenders, it adapts. By midweek, new violations appeared in my mailbox. Improper trash can placement, overgrown hedges, even failure to maintain driveway cleanliness. She wanted to overwhelm me, bury me under paperwork. But every fine she issued became another exhibit. Another clip. Another headline. My videos became a series, each one a chapter in the unraveling of her empire. And then one night I saw her outside. Standing at the end of my driveway, flashlight in hand, photographing my property again. When she noticed my camera on the windowsill, she turned and walked away. No words. No gestures. Just that same composure cracking for the first time. The cracks were small, but they spread fast. The HOA world runs on documents, bylaws, amendments, memos. Margaret weaponized every one of them, but she underestimated how well I could read. While she filed notices, I filed requests. Every letter she sent triggered a demand for clarification. Each fine became a query for legal precedent. Bureaucracy is heavy, and I made her carry all of it. The HOA office clerk, a tired woman named Denise, quietly started slipping notes into my envelope stacks. Off the record, check section 8B. That's where I found it. The clause that said all fines required photographic evidence verified by 2 board members. None of Margaret's citations had that. I didn't post this discovery yet. I waited. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Meanwhile, my audience online grew into millions. The HOA President Saga, they called it. People began analyzing the bylaws themselves, crowdsourcing her contradictions. It was like watching an empire crumble in real time. Then came the shift I didn't expect. Other board members started resigning. First the treasurer, then the maintenance chair. Each resignation letter cited stress due to public scrutiny. That left Margaret standing alone at the podium of control. She responded the only way she knew, more aggression. She filed an emergency motion to place a lien on my property for unpaid fines. The motion passed unanimously because she was the only one voting. But she forgot one thing. Everything she did was now under public record. When I posted the lien notice, the video hit 2 million views in 12 hours. Attorneys, real ones, reached out offering free consultations just to be part of the case. The pressure worked. County auditors began reviewing HOA documentation. One morning, a plain white car parked across the street. Local news again, this time with cameras. Margaret avoided them, pulling her SUV into the garage like a retreating general. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just personal revenge anymore. It had become a case study in power misuse. And deep down, I knew she'd rather destroy the HOA itself than admit defeat. Autumn arrived quietly, but the neighborhood didn't. The HOA's annual dues notice was late, and panic spread. Without a functioning board, the association couldn't process fees or pay for maintenance. The lawns grew wild. The pool closed early. The perfect order Margaret had built started rotting from within. Her control slipped like sand through fingers. Still, she tried to appear composed. She called for a community emergency meeting to restore integrity. Fewer than 10 residents showed up. I stayed outside with my camera. From the open hall doors, her voice echoed, shaky, desperate, rehearsed. She spoke about online lies, about outsiders ruining our neighborhood. But the crowd wasn't buying it. They'd lived the truth. One man asked about the missing dues. Another questioned why the board had no treasurer. Margaret couldn't answer either. Within minutes, the meeting devolved into arguments. Someone stormed out. Another yelled that they were filing a collective complaint with the county. That was the night Margaret lost her authority. Not officially, emotionally. You could see it in the way she walked out, clutching her binder to her chest like it could still protect her. The next morning, her SUV didn't move. No patrol. No photographs. Silence. But silence, I learned, doesn't mean surrender. Behind closed doors, Margaret filed one last motion to dissolve the HOA entirely. She wanted scorched earth. If she couldn't rule, she'd rather leave nothing behind. I caught wind of it from a neighbor who still had access to the mailing list. The motion was illegal. She didn't have the authority to dissolve without a full community vote. So, I prepared my final video. Not angry. Not gloating. Just calm narration over footage of cracked sidewalks, peeling paint, and the empty guardhouse. Images of what control had cost us. The video ended with her voice from a past meeting, promising to protect the beauty and order of this community. Then I let the silence run. 5 seconds. 10. 20. By morning, the clip had 8 million views. That was the day reporters came to her door. And she answered, trembling, defensive, trying to sound rational. But the camera caught what words couldn't hide: fear. The county audit became an official investigation. The term mismanagement of community funds appeared in the paperwork. Margaret was now under review not just for HOA violations, but for potential fraud. Bank records showed missing maintenance payments, duplicate contractor fees, and one large check signed directly by her. It wasn't dramatic. It was devastating. Neighbors who once feared her now spoke freely. They shared stories of fines for imaginary weeds, threats for unpainted mailboxes, letters slipped under doors at midnight. Every tale added weight to the case. And while all this unfolded, I stayed quiet online. My followers wondered why. Some speculated I'd made a deal or backed off. The truth was simpler. I didn't need to say anything. Margaret's own actions narrated the finale. When the investigation report dropped publicly, the findings were clear: financial misconduct, abuse of power, and falsification of community records. She was removed as HOA president, permanently. I thought I'd feel victorious. But when I watched the moving truck pull away from her driveway weeks later, the emotion was different. Not joy, not pity, something quieter: closure. The neighborhood slowly rebuilt itself. A new interim board formed. They rewrote policies, opened communication, made things transparent. People actually smiled again at community events. And me? I stopped uploading for a while. Because revenge stories are addictive, but peace, real peace, doesn't go viral. Months later, I received a letter, handwritten. No envelope logo, no threats. Just words: "I underestimated you. I hope you take care of the garden." It wasn't signed, but I recognized the handwriting. I folded it, placed it in the folder marked HOA Nonsense Number 1, and locked it away. Not as a trophy. As a reminder, power isn't destroyed by outrage. It's destroyed by exposure. And that was how I took hers. The whispers began before sunrise. A neighborhood that once bowed to the HOA president now carried the weight of doubt. People who once waved politely from their driveways started glancing nervously at each other, uncertain which side they stood on. The reports had leaked, small things at first. A series of anonymous emails exposing misused HOA funds, unexplained maintenance invoices, and fake citations issued to homeowners who had never broken a single rule. At first, the board brushed it off as miscommunication. But when screenshots of private group chats surfaced, the illusion cracked wide open. Each message carried the same name behind it: Marilyn Peterson, HOA president. Marilyn had spent years building her empire of control. Every fence color, every mailbox design, every blade of grass existed under her judgment. She had a way of smiling when she punished people, the kind of calm satisfaction that told you she believed herself untouchable. But this time, the mirror was turning back toward her. The narrator, the homeowner she had tried to evict, watched from the sidelines, quiet but prepared. Evidence gathered over months was now a weapon sharpened by patience. Screenshots, recordings, and HOA receipts that never added up were ready to be revealed, one piece at a time. At the next board meeting, the tension was so thick it could have suffocated the air itself. Homeowners sat shoulder to shoulder, whispering accusations under their breath. Marilyn entered, chin raised, pearls gleaming, pretending not to notice the folded papers clutched in trembling hands around the room. The homeowner didn't speak that night. There was no need. The whispers had already become voices. The same people Marilyn once threatened with fines now questioned her leadership out loud. It wasn't rebellion yet, but it was the start of something she couldn't control. When the meeting ended, Marilyn's perfect posture wavered for the first time. Her confident stride faltered just slightly, and the smile that used to intimidate now trembled under the weight of truth. The next morning, new flyers appeared on every doorstep. Special HOA audit, all members encouraged to attend. The storm was coming, and for once, Marilyn wasn't the one calling it. The day of the audit began with quiet tension. Cars lined both sides of the street. The usually pristine lawns were dotted with clusters of neighbors whispering over steaming mugs of coffee, watching the community hall doors open. The homeowner arrived early, carrying a simple binder. No anger, no confrontation, just proof. Years of subtle control and quiet fear were finally condensed into paper form. Inside, the room felt heavier than ever. The board sat like judges in an old courtroom. Marilyn occupied the center, her expression calm but eyes darting like trapped birds. The auditor, an outsider from the county, laid out spreadsheets and receipts across the table. At first, Marilyn played her usual game. She explained away the missing funds with words like maintenance oversight and administrative misplacement. Her voice carried authority, but her hands betrayed her, tapping nervously against the table. Then the auditor read out the list of fines collected over the past year. Thousands of dollars. Most of it paid in cash. None of it traceable to the official HOA account. Murmurs filled the room. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "That's theft." Marilyn tried to regain control, insisting it was a clerical error. But then the homeowner's binder opened. Photos of fake violation letters. Audio recordings of Marilyn instructing a landscaper to make an example out of one particular yard, his yard. Every file time-stamped. Every piece of evidence undeniable. For the first time, Marilyn's mask slipped completely. Her tone cracked, and anger flashed across her face like lightning. She accused the homeowner of targeting her, of fabricating proof. But the auditor wasn't listening anymore. Neither was the crowd. The board called for recess, but it was already too late. The whispers had turned into open rebellion. That night, the community's private Facebook page exploded. Screenshots, photos, and video clips spread like wildfire. Homeowners who had once kept quiet began posting their own experiences, unfair fines, unexplained letters, retaliatory actions. Each post ended the same way: "We deserve better." By the next morning, the HOA office was surrounded by reporters. Marilyn didn't leave her house all day. The woman who once ruled with silence now hid behind drawn curtains, waiting for a storm she couldn't manipulate. The homeowner stood at his window, watching the chaos unfold, not with triumph, but with steady calm. He hadn't won yet. But for the first time, Marilyn was on defense. And she was running out of ground to stand on. Days turned into weeks, and the once orderly neighborhood began to unravel. Without Marilyn's iron grip, confusion spread like ivy. Who approved maintenance? Who scheduled meetings? Who even controlled the HOA funds now that the accounts were frozen? The system she built to control others was crumbling from within, a perfect reflection of her leadership. For the homeowner, life became strangely peaceful. No new letters. No surprise inspections. Just quiet mornings and the soft hum of sprinklers returning to routine. But beneath the calm surface, something darker brewed. Marilyn wasn't gone. Not yet. She resurfaced through anonymous messages, fake social media accounts claiming the audit was rigged, that the homeowner had doctored evidence to frame her. It was desperation disguised as denial. But the community had already shifted. The once fearful neighbors now saw her for what she was. They stopped replying to her messages, stopped defending her. Silence became her new punishment. Then came the vote. A formal motion to remove Marilyn as HOA president. A record turnout filled the community hall. The tension was electric. Half the crowd wanted closure, the other half wanted justice. When the votes were counted, the result was undeniable. Marilyn Peterson, removed from office, effective immediately. Her power evaporated that night. No cameras. No applause. Just the quiet sound of papers being signed and her empty chair left behind. But endings are rarely clean. The following week, an investigation revealed something unexpected. Marilyn hadn't just manipulated funds. She'd used them to pay for personal upgrades to her home. New roof. Landscape lighting. Even a security system she claimed was for community safety. The board pressed charges. She was forced to step down permanently and repay thousands. For the first time in years, the neighborhood exhaled. The homeowner walked through his front yard, feeling the weight finally lift. The grass looked greener. The air smelled lighter. The war was over, or so it seemed. But as he reached his mailbox, a small envelope waited. No return address. Inside, one handwritten note. "You think this is over? You took my crown, but I'll still haunt your kingdom." No signature. No proof. But he knew. Marilyn wasn't done yet. The neighborhood had finally found its rhythm again. Lawns trimmed, sidewalks swept, laughter echoing from backyards that had once fallen silent under the weight of fear. For the first time in years, the place felt alive. The HOA had new leadership, fair, transparent, democratic. Every homeowner got a voice. But peace in this neighborhood was never permanent. It began quietly, the way all storms do. A small rumor whispered between neighbors that Marilyn had been seen in town again. Some dismissed it, wishful gossip. Others said they spotted her at the grocery store, wearing sunglasses and moving quickly. The homeowner didn't believe it at first. After all, she had been publicly disgraced, fined, and legally barred from holding any HOA position again. What reason could she have to return? Then one morning he found it. A new real estate listing on the community bulletin board. For rent, cozy home, recently renovated. The address was unmistakable. Marilyn's old house. Except the listing wasn't fake. Within weeks, a moving truck appeared in front of the familiar property. A woman stepped out, blonde hair, new style, different wardrobe, but her posture, that rigid stance of superiority, was impossible to mistake. It was her. Marilyn. She had changed her last name, but not her ambition. She wasn't coming back to live quietly, she was coming back to rebuild her influence, piece by piece. At first, she stayed low profile. Smiles for neighbors, friendly waves, polite conversations about how lovely the area had become. But under that charm, she began weaving her old web again. New residents, ones who hadn't lived through her reign, started listening to her advice. She offered help with HOA disputes, suggestions for landscaping, warnings about community safety. And slowly, the poison began to spread again. Whispers of discontent reached the homeowner. Some residents started doubting the new HOA board. They claimed rules were being ignored, that standards were dropping. He recognized Marilyn's language, the same phrases she'd used before to justify her control. One evening, the homeowner walked outside to find pamphlets on every doorstep. Restore order, sign the petition for HOA reform. No name attached, but everyone knew who was behind it. The neighborhood's peace began to fracture. Old divisions reopened. New homeowners didn't know her history. To them, she seemed like a concerned citizen fighting for structure. But the homeowner knew better. He had seen this movie before, and this time, he was ready. He didn't post online. He didn't argue. He simply began to record, document, and collect. Every pamphlet, every message, every whispered rumor. Marilyn had returned to reclaim power. But what she didn't know was that she had returned to a neighborhood that had already learned how to fight back. It didn't take long before Marilyn's campaign gained momentum. She called it community renewal, a plan to restore respect and uniformity. Her flyers spread faster than facts. She played the victim card expertly, portraying herself as the woman wrongfully accused by a vindictive homeowner. For the new residents, she was convincing. For the old ones, she was a nightmare revived. The homeowner stayed quiet, outwardly. Behind the scenes, he began working with the new HOA president, gathering evidence. The same tricks she used before were happening again. Fake complaints, manipulated votes, and private meetings. One night, under the soft glow of porch lights, Marilyn held an unofficial community gathering in her backyard. Dozens showed up. She stood before them, confident again, her voice firm as she promised, to take back the neighborhood from chaos. Phones recorded from the shadows. Cameras captured every word. The next morning, the homeowner uploaded a new video to his YouTube channel, the same one that once exposed her tyranny years before. The title was simple, "She's Back." The video was calm, factual, and devastating. It showed the timeline, her return, her new name, her manipulations. It compared her old letters with her new pamphlets, word for word. It displayed public records proving the house she rented still belonged to a trust under her control. Within 48 hours, the video hit 1 million views. Local media picked up the story again. Disgraced HOA president returns under new name. The neighborhood erupted. Those who had trusted her felt betrayed. Those who had doubted her felt vindicated. The board called an emergency meeting, attended by nearly every resident. When Marilyn arrived, she didn't look powerful anymore. Her face was tight, her movements rigid. The same homeowners she once manipulated now stared at her with quiet contempt. The HOA President read aloud a motion, permanent community ban for harassment, fraud, and misrepresentation. It was unanimous. No one defended her. Not a single hand rose in her favor. For the first time, Marilyn Peterson, or whatever name she had chosen now, realized what true isolation felt like. The control she had built her life around had finally collapsed. Not because someone shouted louder than her, but because truth outlasted her lies. She left that night without a word. The next morning, her car was gone. By sunset, a for lease sign hung again on the lawn. The neighborhood returned to peace, but not ignorance. They had learned that power doesn't corrupt neighborhoods, silence does. Months later, the homeowner walked through the same streets where fear once ruled. The houses glowed softly under the evening sky. Gardens bloomed without judgment. Children played where once there had been whispers. His YouTube channel had grown beyond HOA horror stories. It had become a space for awareness, for people who had been bullied, manipulated, or silenced by authority. Every story shared became another seed of strength planted somewhere else in the world. One day, he received an email from a stranger. The subject line read, "She tried to control our HOA too, but your story gave us courage." He smiled. The cycle had broken. The story had traveled farther than his neighborhood ever could. He stepped into his yard, feeling the cool air wrap around him like a promise. The grass swayed gently, alive, free. Where once stood fear, there was now something greater, resilience. Marilyn had tried to take his home. But in the end, he took her power. And this time, it was permanent.